It's on CAMA 2020, impact on medium, small, and micro, impact on micro, small, and medium enterprises as well. So it will be presented by my humble self, Kayode Robert Ikumelo, an associate with OAL. I work closely with Amaka in the sports, entertainment, and tech sport, entertainment, and tech practice group of the firm. All right, so as we all know, it has been the rave of the moment for the past 3 months. The Companies and Allied Matters Act, CAMA, was signed August 7, 2020, and it is expected to come into force. CAC pegs the time at January 1, 2020. They expect everything to be up and running by then. You would agree with me, however, that CAMA 2020 has actually come at, I don't want to say the right time, but it's a belated introduction into our business environment, because the repealed law was came into force in 1990, about 30 years ago. And you'd agree with me that since 1990, the business environment has grown. Companies are no longer regarded in the same light. You know, when we're coming up, once a year, this person is the CEO of the company, your mind like goes, it roams like, the CEO of a company, that's something big. But now we found out that we are having entrepreneurs who are trying to enter into the business environment. And now more than ever, a lot of people are incorporating companies. People are trying to leave shadow economies, the legal aspects of shadow economies. So people are trying to leave shadow economies and step into the regulatory space or the regulated space, so that they will be able to position themselves to receive investments from people. So the thing is, we can see that companies are, MSMEs are growing, MSMEs are becoming more rampant in the business environment. So even if we will see that MSMEs are becoming more rampant in the Nigerian business environment, we can see that MSMEs account for over 95% of Nigerian businesses, and then they contribute about 49% of Nigeria's GDP. So out of the 95% of Nigerian businesses, 73% of MSMEs are sole proprietorships, while 14% are private limited liability companies. Only about 6% are partnerships. So we can see that MSMEs are huge. MSMEs are everywhere in the Nigerian business space. And so there is now the need to ensure that there is a set of laws which support MSMEs, which support the growth of MSMEs, and which make the business environment very, very attractive, not just for investors, but for people who operate in the shadow space to want to come into the regulated space for their own benefits and for the benefit of the economy. So that is why CAMA 2020 has become really important. The profound objective, which is to ensure the growth of the economy, and which is to ensure that MSMEs are well supported within the Nigerian business environment. So in this discussion, in this presentation, we'll be looking at what are the particular provisions that have direct impact on the business of MSMEs. What are the provisions we can see that support MSMEs? What are the provisions we can see that ensure that MSMEs thrive within the Nigerian business space? Next slide. So like I said, MSMEs are the lifeblood of the Nigerian economy. And so some provisions have been put in place which are worth considering, especially as they have a direct impact on MSMEs. So the very first one, I think it will even be good to start with the reclassification of small companies. Under CAMA 1990, last slide, yeah, previous slide. Yeah, so under CAMA 1990, we could see that small companies had, next slide, please, Stephanie. No, the previous one. So under CAMA 1990, under CAMA 1990, we could see that MSMEs were classified with having as companies which had, or small companies were classified as companies which had an annual turnover of 2 million naira and net assets net assets at the end of the year of 1 million naira. It's obvious that, okay, as at 1990, 2 million naira was such a huge amount. 1 million naira was such a huge amount. So if you had an annual turnover of 2 million naira and you were still being classified as a small company, it was good for your business because not, I imagine at that time, I was not born then, I imagine at that time they would be talking about 10,000 naira. If you had 10,000 naira, you were blown, it was blown. Yet your company was posting annual turnovers of 100,000 naira, you will be worshipped. But now, if that classification would not do so much good to small companies now or to MSMEs now, because even someone who's selling small chops would actually post an annual turnover of over 2 million. You understand? And at this stage, if the person who makes 2 million naira is no longer seen as a small company and has to adhere to tons of regulatory and compliance, regulatory or regulatory requirements, these things might hurt the person's business. So the very first place to start, which was quite commendable, was to change the classification for small companies, which now meant that small companies are now seen as companies, amongst other requirements. Small companies now have an annual turnover of at most 120 million naira and a net asset value of 60 million naira at the end of the year. So with this, a lot of companies, a lot of companies, a lot of growing companies, a lot of entrepreneurs fall under small companies. And as such, there are now some provisions which tend to support their business and ease the regulatory burden off of these companies. So we'll be examining them we're examining them over the course of the next 10 minutes. Next slide. So we have the introduction of single member companies, introduction of single member companies or one-person companies, fondly called OPCs, not Odua People's Congress. So under the former version of the Act, you have to, before you are incorporated as a company, you would have to have a partner. So there are only at least two persons can incorporate a company. A company has to have two members. So in essence, if you have a vision, you have a goal, if you have a drive, if you want to form a company and like create a company to advance a certain business, you had to have another person as a subscriber on the memorandum of association. So you have to have another person who might share your vision or necessarily share your vision, or you might just have another person for, just to decorate the memorandum of association and fulfill all righteousness. But now, CAMA 2020 has provided that a company can be formed by at least one person. You can have a single member company. And single member companies, in order to support single member companies or support the nuances which they present, single member companies have been exempted from a whole lot of regulatory requirements, along with small companies too. So companies are exempted from holding AGMs compulsorily. I mean, it stands to reason. If you have only one member of the company, why are you holding an annual general meeting where you just sit down, you by yourself will pass a resolution and that's that. So it stands to reason that single member companies should be exempted from holding AGMs. Single member companies can also have at least one director, along with small companies. They can also have at least one director. So they do not need to have two directors. They can also have at least one director. And also one of the advantages of the setup is that more sole proprietors can establish their business as companies. So there are a lot of people who are running their businesses through business names. Business names, or they are running it as sole proprietors. Now the thing with business names, ordinarily it's easy to run. It's your decision. You understand? It's your decision. You can take decisions at your own pace. But the problem is accessing investment, accessing funding, trying to get credit. It will not be easy for a bank to loan money to a sole proprietorship because they know that anything that happens to the man, anything that happens to the sole proprietor brings the business to a halt. Also, it would not be easy to get investors because we're talking equity here. Business sole proprietors do not have equity. So the thing is, this setup now makes establishing a company really attractive to people who were previously doing it under sole proprietorship because they can now come into the company, they can now establish the company on their own. They can have share capital, which they can have share capital, which in sorry, they can have share capital, which can have like which investors can invest in and receive shares or equity within the company. They can also access credit. They can also access loans from banks and other financial institutions. Also, single member companies as well as small companies are exempt from mandate appointing auditors and secretaries. So they do not need to appoint auditors every year, or they do not need to appoint an auditor mandatorily. All these things all these things are extra expenses to the company, and it would serve them better if they would be exempted from doing this. And CAMA has come to ensure that they are exempted from all these regulatory burdens. Although we know that company secretaries hold a very important position. So it's actually good to also advise companies to have company secretaries. Next slide, please. So introduction of limited liability partnership. So CAMA 2020 also introduces limited liability partnerships. So it's actually especially good for parties who want to go into joint venture or establish a special purpose vehicle for the purpose of carrying out a specific project. So two individuals or two companies can come together to incorporate an entity without necessarily forming a company. So when they come together, they incorporate the entity, they transfer liability from themselves to they incorporate a partnership, an LLP. They transfer liability from themselves to the LLP so they can do business. There's this thing that helps you, like there's this thing with knowing that you are not at risk of going bankrupt personally from the kind of business you do. So you can be more innovative, knowing fully well that whatever risk, whatever liability you are incurring will be borne through the assets of the entity which you've incorporated. So when companies or entities come together, when individuals come together to form an LLP, they have limited liability to the tune of their personal contribution as stated in the partnership deed. So it helps them to go into business without fear or without that risk hovering over their head that they could go bankrupt if, or the company could suffer the problem or the issues if things don't go as planned. So limited liability partnership help to increase innovation within the business space. Also, CAMA 2020 has brought about electronic solutions. It's the world has moved on a lot from 1990. From the comfort of your home, there's now e-commerce. You can just there are things there are technical solutions or there are technological solutions for virtually anything. So it does not make any sense to still be operating manually or to still be operating in the analog realm. We should be able to, one of the things that increases ease of doing business is that we are able to bring convenience to our regulatory space. We are able to bring convenience to the way business is regulated in Nigeria. So CAMA 2020 tries to ensure this by incorporating electronic solutions in a lot of our procedures and in a lot of things we do within the business space. So we have electronic filings provided for by Section 861 of CAMA. Electronic filings simply means that whatever you want to file with CAC, you can actually stay in the comfort of your home and file online. You can file through your portal with CAC. Electronic signatures, gone are the days when you have to in order to submit a particular form to CAC, you have to ferry the document across different states in Nigeria. If everybody that has to sign live in different states in Nigeria, you have to put the CAC form 7 or the CAC form 1 or CAC form 2. You have to put it in GIG. You have to put it in PISMAS. They have to take it Lagos to Nasarawa to get the signature of the other director. They have to take it from, and then if someone is in US, you have to use DHL, send it to US to get the person to sign. All these things are now being cut back because the turnaround time also goes into how we are perceived in the outside world as creating an enabling environment for business in Nigeria. So with electronic signatures, people are able to sign, directors, shareholders anywhere in Nigeria, are able to append their signatures or authenticate documents using electronic solutions. For instance, if you have encrypted signatures, you can append them to documents and now they'll be recognized as being valid by CAC. Recognized as being valid by CAC. I particularly do not advise the use of scanned signatures because anybody can scan your signature, and if it is a norm within your company, if it is a norm within your organization, it's actually there's a risk of fraud, there's a risk of fraudulent activities being perpetrated with your signature. So I think it would be wise to advise businesses to have businesses, directors, individuals, entrepreneurs to have encrypted signatures, which they can append onto documents. These things give assurances of the fact that the document was indeed properly authenticated and was in fact not changed after it had been authenticated. So we also have virtual AGMs for private companies. You will agree with me that I think an eye-opener in this regard was COVID-19. After COVID-19 came, a lot of us started using Zoom application a lot. Before then, I didn't even install it on my phone. So even now, it's an eye-opener for a lot of us. Virtual AGMs for private companies. There is no need to there's no need to always try to hold a physical AGM. It would save a lot more money if some of these things could be done virtually. For instance, if we were to organize this masterclass, if we were to organize these discussions in a private or in a physical location, we would have to pay for hall, we would have to pay for tea, refreshment. There has to be item 7. We have to pay for rice, we have to pay for all those other things. And now that we are holding it virtually, it is coming at a very, very reduced cost. So these things allow companies, especially private companies, to hold virtual AGMs at very reduced cost. Of course, there are legal ramifications for this. There are some concerns around holding virtual AGMs, but these are not really relevant at this particular discussion. But virtual AGMs actually help MSMEs, especially private companies who want to hold those virtual AGMs, who want to hold AGMs to be able to hold it virtually at no cost to them. Statement of compliance provided for by Section 36. Ordinarily, when you want to incorporate the company, you have to have declaration of compliance signed by a legal practitioner or a notary public. But and that could be extra cost to MSMEs or extra cost to individuals who want to incorporate companies. However, Section 36 now provides that you do not exactly need, it does not really abolish the declaration of compliance. A lawyer could still do that for you. But individually, as a person, you could just submit a statement of compliance stating that you complied with all the requirements of CAMA as to incorporation. So it can be signed by you now, as opposed to paying probably that 50,000 naira to that lawyer to help you just sign that document, the declaration of compliance. Next slide. Common seals. So common seals have become optional for companies. So where your articles of association permit a company's contract or deed does not have to be executed using a common seal. So now your directors can sign the document, your director and a secretary can sign the document, or a director can sign the document in the presence of two witnesses, just like you would personally do that if you want to probably sign a deed or a contract. So common seal is not especially mandatory again. And then you now, just like I said, pen the electronic signature on the document and it will be taken as duly executed or duly authenticated by the company. Next slide. So Attorney General's consent for registration of company limited by guarantee. So ordinarily under the repealed act, the AG has to give consent to anybody or any promoter who wants to register a company limited by guarantee. So what you would find that since that consent at that point was mandatory, people had to wait. People had to keep waiting till when the AG decided to give its consent to promoters to finally register the company limited by guarantee. And what we now found out was that a lot of people we're now instead of registering companies limited by guarantee, they were now registering incorporated trustees. And the problem with that is that with incorporated trustees, you cannot do business at all, purely charitable. You cannot do business, you cannot make profit. So you would have to rely a lot on grants and subventions. But with companies limited by guarantee, you can do business, you can make profit from your charitable work, but you cannot exactly, distribute those profits to members of the company. So a lot of sports academies, a lot of sports organizations where you find out that the companies limited by guarantee would suit their businesses more. Because then when you want to establish a sports academy, you can receive money from those who want to enroll and then use it to run the sports academy perfectly, use it to run your football academy very well without having to rely solely on grants. But if you are doing that with incorporated trustees, you cannot do business, you cannot receive money from anybody for the purpose of making profit or whatever. So now under this new act, the AG is mandated to give consent to applicants within 30 days or communicate refusal to give same. So if the AG does not give consent within 30 days, the act provides for alternative procedures, which would be that you now have to advertise in 3 dailies, and then the CAC upon advertise. When you advertise, you have to call for objections, and then after that, the CAC would register the company, following other steps too. So the AG's consent is no longer mandatory. So basically now there are business recovery procedures. There are business recovery procedures now. So administration. So ordinarily under the old CAMA, when you are insolvent, geared more to winding as opposed to ensuring the survival. As opposed to ensuring the survival of your business. So now under this new act, business recovery procedures, there are now some mechanisms set in place which would help you keep your business which are geared towards keeping the business as a going concern, ultimately towards the good of the economy, and then towards the survival of the business and the promotion. So administration is now geared more towards business revival and not the eventual winding up of business as provided for by Section 442 of CAMA. Also, another mechanism which has been put in place to ensure the survival of businesses is netting procedure. So netting procedure in simpler terms is combination of two different obligations. So for instance, and then when you combine the two different obligations, you pay the net of whatever difference that exists between the two different procedures. For instance, let's say during insolvency, I owe you about 200 million naira, and then I actually carried out a service for you. I'm giving a basic definition for netting. I actually carried out a service for you, then me about 50 million naira. So with netting, we can combine both provisions, both obligations, and then I'll actually pay you the difference. which is about 150 million naira. So it means that I now owe you 150 million naira. So it is now recognized as a means of ensuring that creditors get their money, you can net obligations, and then it helps you so that you don't have to do different transactions, which might have varying tax implications.
Is a business-friendly law, and then it behoves on entrepreneurs, budding entrepreneurs, sports academy owners, record label holders to try to take advantage of these laws, of these provisions, in order to themselves for more investment and position themselves better for better placed within the industry. So we know that there are a lot of sports academies within Lagos. There are a lot of sports academies within Nigeria that operate on the down low. They are not registered. We know there are a lot of record labels within Lagos, within Nigeria, operate on down low. They are not registered too. But then, as professionals, we should be able to bring these provisions to them, explain the ramifications of this provision to them, to ensure that they take advantage of these laws. So MSMEs, on the other hand, also even the registered ones, have to take advantage of these provisions. They have to consult better. It has been said, it has been established by IFAT, so even by Beverly, the importance of consulting with experts. There are, like I said, there are ramifications of this act. There are issues arising from this act. There are things that we know how lawyers, accountants will know how best to navigate. So it's better to consult with experts in order to understand the ramifications of this act and have a better understanding of the full extent of the impact on our business. So that's my time. Thank you very much.